My name is Liam Joffe, and this is my report on adolescent autism assisting automatons. Basically, robots that assist children who are growing up with autism. The main goals of my project were to investigate the impact that these robots can have on the early lives of these children. Some of the things we'll be looking at is the symptoms of autism, the design of the robots to help the kids with autism, the actual interactions that these robots will have with the kids, and some of the past performance of the existing robots. So what is autism? Well, it's a spectrum. People with autism can have varying difficulties with their emotions, comprehending the emotions of others, engaging or playing with others, eye contact and focus. They have issues with physical contact, with interpersonal communication, and using their imagination. And like I said, this isn't every kid having all of these issues, but most of them will have most of these issues to varying degrees. You can see on the chart here that the diagnosis rate for autism has been growing steadily, but you kind of got to look at it with a grain of salt because why is it growing? Do more people have autism? It's a spectrum, so you could kind of hand wave and say this is minor autism, this is severe autism, blah, 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 blah. It might be overdiagnosis, more testing, better testing, and that's what causes the numbers to kind of look like they're getting so much higher when in reality they might not be as severe as you see here. Although for an individual with autism throughout their lifetime, it costs about $2.4 million to support them. And as you can see, yeah, the numbers are going up, so it is kind of becoming an issue. So how could robots help those with autism? Well, research suggests that those with autism feel comfortable in more predictable environments, and what's a more predictable environment than that of a computer or a robot? They enjoy interacting with the robots, and there's the attention tunnel that comes with the robot or the computer, which kind of helps them focus on what they need to and filter out all the external stimuli. Now, when these robots are being designed, there's a lot of factors that you have to look at. Do you make it look like a human? Do you make it look animal-like? Do you make it look like Wall-E? How big do you make it? How many degrees of freedom do you have? How durable should you make it? What about the colors and the interesting mechanical components that it's going to have on it? And what about a feedback mechanism to have the kids be able to see that what they're doing gets a positive or negative reaction, etc. With the design choice of what to make your robot look like, it's generally understood that children will react better to the non-humanoid robots, but with the non-humanoid robots, it's much harder to teach them interpersonal communication because they're not talking to a human or a pseudo-human. So these less lifelike robots will allow you to have a greater exaggeration of the emotions. Like imagine the Grinch smiling on Christmas. He's obviously got a much huger smile than anything you've ever seen before. So the kids who have trouble picking up on emotions would be able to more easily pick up on it. But also it's not human-like, so they might have trouble going back and forth between that and an actual human. Along with the degrees of freedom, there are pros and cons. If you have more degrees of freedom, it's probably going to be easier for you to capture their attention because you're moving a lot more and it's a bit more interesting. You can do more complex facial movements and you could even like clap and give feedback to the kids. But it's obviously a more complex design. It's a lot less robust and durable potentially. And they could even be a bit overwhelming and distracting, which would detract from the overall learning experience that the kid's going to have. Some of the designs that need to be avoided are those that are too bright because they could be distracting, too many mechanical parts that are too interesting because they could be distracting as well. But also you have to avoid a design that's too uninteresting and not distracting enough so it wouldn't be able to like captivate their attention. Another good thing that these robots can have is feedback mechanisms like the potential to light up, to clap, to play music so that you can let the kid know that he's doing the right thing. So basically, there's a balance required. You can't have the robot be too interesting and distracting, but you have to have it be enough to captivate the kid's attention. And here's an interesting quote about it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can pause the slideshow and take a look at it if you'd like. The goals of the robot's intervention are to simulate real life interactions that the kids kind of miss out on. And this is done through helping develop their focus and ability to maintain attention, evoking joint attention, eliciting imitation, and facilitating turn taking and sharing. Maintaining attention is hard for a lot of these kids, and typically getting their attention in the first place isn't hard, but maintaining it can be. So therefore, the robots really need to have a back and forth with the kids in a way to give feedback so the kids will stay engaged with them and capture their attention. Another goal for these robots is evoking joint attention, and that's basically having the child and somebody else or something else, aka the robot, focus on the same object or subject. So for a simple example of that, I mean, have the robot look or point towards something and try and have the kid and the robot paying attention to the same object at the same time, which is typically hard for those with autism to be able to do. A lot of children, when they're growing up, will learn through imitating others, typically what they'll see their parents do. Like imagine your parents are waving hi to somebody, you'll see that and you'll wave hi to somebody as well with them. But a lot of kids with autism struggle to do that. However, when they're interacting with robots, a lot of imitation seems to just arise naturally. Those with autism typically have trouble with turn taking and sharing, and these robots can be used mostly by playing games with the children to teach them turn taking and sharing. How can these robots actually teach these traits, though, you might ask? Like I just said, though, a lot of the times it's just through playing games with the robots. The robots are designed to like stand in as playmates for the children, and they can show up by themselves or in a group and take the leading position. They can be followers, they could just be peers to the children with autism during the playing of the games. Something you might also ask is what are the levels of autonomy of these robots? And currently, it's not much. A lot of these robots are controlled via the Wizard of Oz scheme, and that's basically a reference to the man behind the curtain from the Wizard of Oz movie. And that person will have control of the robot and kind of act through the robot to interact with the child. Obviously, the solution is definitely not suitable for widespread deployment, and if there's going to be a real breakthrough in the therapeutic interaction with these children with the robots, there's going to need to be a big advancement in the autonomy of these robots. There are multiple examples of robots that have been used to conduct these experiments for autism intervention with children, although a lot of the results seem to be mixed and not really conclusive enough. Some people have stated that that's due to the difference between the psychology research and the robot research standards, and there will be some of the examples on the following slides. So one of the first robots we'll take a look at is Caspar, and there's been two experiments that I could find done with him. And the first one was to improve the tolerance to physical contact, which had some success and some use of communication with the robot, as well as another experiment to improve social skills by playing games with the robot. And there was significant improvement in the subject's gaze patterns, but none in verbal communication. The next robot's Now, N-A-O, and there's three experiments that I could find with him. The first one is to compare the effect of a robot versus a human in a motor imitation game, and the robot didn't really receive better or worse reaction than the human. The other one's to compare robot versus human therapy. Same thing. Robot didn't get any better or worse than the human. And the last experiment was to compare a robot and a human attempts to improve joint attention skill. And the reaction to humans was better than that of robots, actually. Yikes. The next robot's name is Probo, and there's two experiments. The first one was to compare the effect of the robot versus a PC to improve question asking, eye gaze, asking help, and greetings, and there was significant improvement among the robot group. The next experiment was to compare the effect of a robot versus a human to improve social skills, and there was significant improvement among the robot group. So this was a robot that actually had great success. Pleo is another robot. One of the first experiments it did was to improve the communication skills of those with autism, and the results are an increase in time spent speaking, but no increase of face-to-face orientation. And then the next experiment was comparing a robot versus a PC game to reinforce verbal communication, and the robot was shown to be the better interventionist here. So again, good success. Isobot is the next one, and the experiment goal with him was to improve imitation and practice, which is basically your smooth motor skills performance, and there was improved performance in the tests, so he did well as well. Another robot was Troy, and the goal of that experiment was to improve the turn-taking skill during social communications, and there was a noticeable improvement in social communication skills, so another good one. The Lego Mindstorm Nxt is the next robot, and the experiment was to improve the social communication, and the results are a reduction in the number of stereotype behaviors and a positive attitude towards the robot. So again, another good one. The last robot was Face, and the experiment was to increase the understanding of facial emotions. You could have guessed that one though. And the result was some improvements. So in the end, the complications of these robots is the research that's done doesn't really line up well or doesn't mesh well between the robotics side and the psychology side. Additionally, you really have to find a really fine balance for these robots to actually work well with those with autism. The autonomy of the robots currently is very lacking, but the increasing rate of autism among children could influence the funding and research. So, the end.